Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this wonderful, precious world that we are privileged enough and honoured enough to be in. Now, having said that, that is what I now feel. But I am coming across a lot of people who feel safe enough with me, which is amazing, to express that they don't want their next birthday to come and they don't want to be alive right now. And they are sitting on a lot of trauma that is unresolved, and therefore they are in a lot of pain. And it's, on the one hand, it's incredible to be able to sit and listen and witness how brave people are. And on the other, I think it just propels me more into wanting to get just some very simple messages out into the world. And through these series of videos, I'm going to be sharing some of the things I've learned. Now, TCM, so traditional Chinese medicine or integrated Chinese medicine, which is what I was trained in, teaches us that our emotional health is absolutely paramount to having our dynamic life force in our hands rather than in other people's. And I think the ways in which we view trauma and mental health is slightly confusing, or at least I get slightly confused by it, because very often when I get to hear the reality of what people have gone through, I slightly feel like in a way, an emotional paramedic. So if you can imagine, if you're a physical paramedic and you are brought to the scene of an accident and someone is unfortunately hurt or damaged or bleeding or they have a broken limb, the paramedics are trained to know exactly what to do to make the person comfortable and safe, and they are reassuring. And yet, and of course I'm generalizing, so please forgive me, because this is not true of everybody, but as a generalization, when we are witnessing other people having gone through a lot of trauma, we seem to now live in a world where we don't have time to pay attention properly, and we're not really equipped to know how appropriate actually other people's responses are to the various traumatic events that happen. So it's my job to sort of be like an emotional or even a spiritual, I don't mean religiously, but your essence. I'm like a spiritual essence paramedic, and I get to listen and hear and witness what has gone on in your life. Now, not only am I trained in it, but I too have gone through my fair share of traumas, from massive sexual violations to being blown up out of my bed. And it's also fairly traumatic having had surgeries since the age of 7, and I'm still having them. So I think what I've learned is that we mostly all will go through some levels of trauma, physical, mentally, spiritually. And yet, actually, if we can learn how appropriate our emotional responses were, and that in fact they've just got stuck, things can begin to be slightly simpler, and our sense of worth and value and our emotional understanding, not intellectual, but our emotional understanding of energetically what is going on when we suddenly get to the point, or maybe continually get to the point, where we actually do not want to live and we do not know how to take hold of our precious lives. That can make a difference. So if any of you are feeling stuck and overwhelmed and are judging yourself as there's something wrong, or you're never going to see the light of day, or you don't really want to live, if you wanted to, please, you can always reach out to me. But right now, the point of these particular videos is to give you brush strokes of what has really worked for me. And it's in the hope that if you are struggling, and as far as I can make out, the truth is that far more of us are struggling than we perhaps feel safe enough to acknowledge or admit. If you're one of those people who are struggling, maybe this will give you some hope, because the more that we can learn in what I call emotional health, and we can lean into feeling angry or sad or lonely or frightened. Lonely isn't exactly an emotion, but I think it triggers a lot of emotional responses. And the more we can begin to catch up with the overloading that our bodies very often have, then in fact there is a chance that we can ignite far more joy. And with the absurd life that I have, and it's absurd because if you have 39 surgeries and a cancer diagnosis and a stroke and all sorts of stuff, even though I am very much alive and I love my precious life, my days are absurd because I can, which has happened at lunchtime, I can leave the table to go and do something, and I left a couple of friends and I was feeling okay, and then 10 minutes later I returned and my heart rate was all over the place, my blood pressure was so low, my thermostat crashed, and I was absolutely frozen. And I had absolutely no control over that. But I know what's going on, so I just ride the waves. And I've also learned to ride the waves of emotional stuff. So my life isn't free of traumas, and I'm not convinced that living our lives, even the best life that we could possibly imagine, is going to be free of traumas. I don't think we get to our graves, or however we want to be buried, I don't think we get to that point where we breathe our last breath without having more events that are going to challenge us. And all I'm here to share continually is that no matter what comes at us, we really do have much more capacity to be dynamically responsive, and we can want to live. I'm going to again repeat this. If by any chance you are not wanting to live, for me as a practitioner, that is a symptom that the guttering in your own being needs to be cleared and released. And although that's a very simplistic view, I can assure you that when you are witnessed for the realities that you have had to face, you have had to go into, it is quite extraordinary what can take place so that you begin to have more hope, more joy, and more peace. Lots of love to you. Take care. Bye.